All right. So before I even throw that whole framework out, I want to begin with basic questions, and I want you to think of these. And this is something I want you to think out loud with me. So the basic thesis idea is that there's a structure and architecture to all human activity. This is coming from sociocultural theory. We did not spend time on this, so I'm kind of doing a quick 101, but we could have read 2-3 weeks on this. But my question to you is, how is classroom learning organized? Let's think out loud. I want you to think about that. How is classroom learning structured? So when you look at a classroom, the classrooms you've been observing, the classrooms you've been seeing before, or your own self as a student, think back. How are classrooms organized? How are they structured? So what are things you see? Yeah.
I think nowadays it's a lot more in table groups. Well, for the younger grades anyways, I think it's a lot of table groups. Well, it's funny because I think last week we were kind of talking about something like this also, and I realized that when I was younger, it was all sitting in rows facing the teacher. So I don't know what changed, but.
And chairs like these, right? You all cluster and you want to do but we could have said it's all going to be rows and it's going to be rows in this class. Mm-hmm. So you see the way people are configured and you see more kind of groups. So that's a way of structuring learning. How else is learning structured in a classroom? Don't think too hard. Yes?
Teachers set up routines in the class.
Okay, this is important. Take it for granted stuff, but the teachers tend to be the ones leading and setting up the routines. What else? How is learning structured? So teachers are doing stuff. Students and their bodies are placed in a particular way. Yes, Glenn?
In terms of curriculum structure, especially in math, it's you have lessons and then you have a quiz, and then you might have another quiz before a test.
Okay.
So it's checkpoints and then it's a test at the end.
So there are assessments of learning, but then there's a structure tied to the way maybe it's taught. Maybe there's concepts, they work towards them. It's interesting because the lesson design is scaffolded probably, and you said interestingly in mathematics, because it may be different in other fields, it depends. In arts, it's probably not going to look like that, right? There's a tendency, fortunately, unfortunately, in mathematics to actually have very linear ways of thinking about knowledge development. And then you assess this way, and then they memorize things, and then you test them and see if they got the answer right. What else? How else is learning organized? So we have teachers kind of structuring learning, students configured in different ways, and then curriculum is designed, and there's assessment. But what else forms the structure of a classroom? Yeah.
There's student collaboration going on instead of being oh, you have to learn these facts and do this and that and do lots of memorization. It's kind of more collaboration, and then what you can get and learn from others as well as from the teacher as well.
So there are teachers doing a lot of talking, traditional classrooms, but you also have spaces where there's the teachers decentered from the center, and then you have collaboration happening. Here's another question. Who constitutes the learning community? Who are they? Who are the primary people in a classroom? Students and the teacher. Now, is it possible that other people are present in a classroom while not physically being present? Some of you are nodding. So who? Who else might be there while not physically being there?
Parents.
Parents. How are parents present?
Well, because parents have to support the student learning at home in multiple ways, and that's where kids spend a lot of time at home as well, so
yes.
They need that support there.
So when I ask that question, I don't mean ghosts are present. I don't know how it's coming up. But you've answered from a sociocultural lens. Do you come with the cultural traditions and artifacts and tools into? So schools, the classroom, we often think of the four walls. Here you want to think of the walls as being blurred, right? They're open, and the community is present. But who else that's maybe not the community of the families is present in classrooms? Yes?
Administrators?
Yes, absolutely. So people say, oh, I have total autonomy, I close my doors. Administration's also there. They may not have a camera that's watching what they're doing, but there may be things like standards. Common Core. Common Core did not come from teachers. I know that's a storyline that we hear, but it came from policymakers. And so policymakers are also present in a classroom. I want you to think of the community all the time. Who is here present? But the groups that are most proximate to the practice are students and teachers. Those are the two major groups that are going to be there. Now, here's another question. What are the goals of classroom learning? So what are goals of classrooms? This is architecture. We're breaking down the architecture. I'm just asking questions. So what are goals? What are some goals that you think classrooms are trying to do? Yes?
I guess originally, to borrow from 206, it was kind of to, I guess, assimilate students into a certain culture, but I think nowadays it's more about giving them access to opportunities in the future.
Okay. So there are people who critically analyze schools, and they've argued that they're like socialization, sites of socialization. And it's what I've differentiated between schooling and education. But now you're saying we've kind of shifted more and it's about education. Like when you put career and college readiness, and if a school is really living up to that, it's challenging those models of, say, reproducing a social class. Now you really are trying to educate children. You're trying to develop a better sense of self. You're trying to develop also skill sets so that they can come to places like Chapman, USC, UCI. What other goals do you see in classroom learning? Yes?
I think like whatever the task is, moving toward independence. Like when you start with scaffolding, with the teacher doing it like I do, we do, you do type of model, whether it's like a math problem or like answering history questions or anything, like you're constantly just trying to give them enough scaffolding until they can eventually do it in a group and then do it on their own.
Okay. So you're defining the goals in terms of, like, it's structured how people come to so let's say the goals is learning content and science, right? Concepts. You're saying that the kind of scaffolding, the apprenticeship model is playing out. That's a way in which the learning is structured. This is really important because often we assume the goals are completely understood by everybody. And one of you was, you were writing, and this could be because of your other class, you're thinking about this concept of intersubjectivity. It's when there's mutual agreement upon the goals or the collective goals. But what you're going to find in classrooms is that sometimes you have the space of the teacher and you have the space of the students, and they don't coalesce. You see a lot of this in high school. When high school youth come in with different goals, like I want to learn these other things or I don't want to engage, and then you have teachers sometimes pulling teeth. And so it seems like the interaction is happening, but what's happening, there's two planes. Those are metaphors. I don't know if you've seen those diagrams when, see like my hands are in two levels, but you can see they're in two, and then when you go this way, it looks like they're one. And so sometimes learning is like that. There's a tension and a distance between students and teachers. That distance need not be something negative, at least from a sociocultural lens, and I'll explain it. The other question, what major tools, resources, scaffolds are used in classroom learning? I really want us to think about this question, and I will strongly urge that you maybe try to focus and zoom in, thinking from that lens. What are all the tools you're using to teach whatever concepts are being developed? What are they? From language to talk to structure and participation, setting up discourse, to realia, to graphic organizing. What are all the things they're using to try to bring students along to understand a concept? And the other question that I have here is what tensions exist between teachers and students? Tensions are always present between different people who interact. Even among students, not all students are on the same plane, don't have the same vision, or perhaps don't have the same goals, and that can change from a day to day. You can come to a classroom feeling ill, or there's a context, something's happening in your personal life. Some of you may be right now in that place. And so you come here and you're not engaged, you're disengaged, or you're engaged in something else. And so that's normal though, from a sociocultural lens, that's not a bad thing. It's how do we bridge to everybody's understanding of what learning is happening. One way of doing this, meta communication. So teachers know this well when they say today's lessons, the goals are right here, right? You have them very clear. But often we create that goal. Like I said, today I'm gonna do this mini lesson on what I'm doing right now. You didn't say, I want this, I need this. I'm the one who's creating it. So often it's very teacher-led. There's nothing wrong with that, though. Often we kind of moralize that, like, oh, it's teacher-centered, that's bad. But from an apprenticeship model, there has to be a lot of guidance that's happening. And then there's also letting go in a process where you set up structures and learning is happening in multiple ways. There are also tensions between the tools and resources and the goals of the learning. Can anybody think of how that's possible? Yes, Bianca.
I know when my case study student that I'm working with, her parents don't speak any English. So when she has homework and she has like things to do, it's hard for her to successfully like do them and reach her goals because she can't help.
So the tools, the language
Yeah, the
spoken.
language, yeah.
That's the tool of tools. And then the learning goals, there's like it's not in English, they don't call this. That's a really clear example. Yes.
I think that can also be seen in like the technology in the classroom. So sometimes using those tools it doesn't help accomplish like the lesson that you're trying to teach or the content.
Yeah.
It can be distracting or
Yeah.
students can waste time on them. And so sometimes I think that can cause tension
That's
between the goal.
That's a good point. Sometimes tools introduce different goals for people. Students have agency. They work. They're not passive. Even when a student seems passive, they're not being passive. That's at least a sociocultural lens. They're probably resisting, or they've checked out, but their mind is somewhere. I don't think their mind is in La La Land or like my kids. They watch SpongeBob, and I guess I don't know who's the little worm in SpongeBob. The little Plankton, and Plankton goes into SpongeBob's brain one time, and like there was. Like SpongeBob has a lot of ideas, but we all do, and students take up technology in different ways. So I want to read this quote. It's really powerful, and I know, give me 1 minute, 1 minute. Any psychological process with the development of thought or voluntary behavior is a process undergoing changes right before our very eyes. History, development is happening as you observe students even in a minute. You always want to feel and be attuned to that. And this is the social organization of learning. It's a diagram. I'm going to give you a handout, but what it is, thank you. What it is, it basically argues that there's a basic structure between the subjects in the classroom, teachers, the students, and the goals. How do they reach those goals? Through mediation, through scaffolds, through tools and resources. But students in relationship to a goal, teachers in relationship to a goal don't work alone. There's a community. Because there's a community, there's a division of work. Somebody's doing something, other people are doing other things. But you can never have, according to sociocultural theory, it's just a division of work. You also need rules. Rules here doesn't mean like bad stuff. It means the way participation is structured. So I want you to take this diagram, and in your next observations, I want you to be intent in thinking about what is the object, what is the goal of what's happening. Is it what the teacher is saying? Might students have a different goal? Who are the participants? But with the focus being mostly what are the tools, the scaffolds, the resources, anything that mediates, breaks down learning is working towards that. So, sorry this is kind of rushed, but it's a tool. I have every confidence that as you look at this and see it as a map, in your next site fieldwork observation, see it as a map. Try to even write on it, map it out. How is the work being distributed? What is the goal? Don't assume the goal is just the goal of the teacher, but the goal also is contested in its shape and form, and it kind of morphs. And that's just the nature of activity. But the tools, if you can focus on the tools, scaffolds, and that I think is going to give us a certain entry point into thinking about how learning is happening and how the support for emergent bilinguals is taking place. Okay, cool. All right, now I gotta stop this. Okay.